This video is sponsored by Discord. Click the link in the description to join our Treesicle Discord. More information at the end of the video. Have you ever feared that your dreams are not your own? That somewhere deep in your subconscious is a haunting presence pulling your strings? Not only while you sleep, but also while you're wide awake. Such a fear is perhaps irrational, perhaps not. In the last Hello Neighbor video, we uncovered the terrifying truth behind our neighbor and his family. What used to be a joyous, carefree life of laughter quickly turned to a miserable life of regret and loneliness, heading towards insanity. The spooky house began with moderately questionable add-ons and quickly devolved into further chaos, clearly as a way to keep you in once you knew too much. There were walls around the perimeter and puzzles that had to be solved within a maze to win your freedom. Our neighbor may be losing his mind. He may be our kidnapper, but somewhere behind those cold, dead eyes is the memory of a life he holds onto so dearly. A life with children, with a wife, and without the gnawing pain of regret. Our neighbor lost his daughter to his own son. He lost his wife to a car accident, but what happens next? What of the surreal house we find ourselves navigating in Act 3? What of the Shadowman? These are the questions we have left, and the ones which feel the most daunting. At least to me. This house is crazy! And the Shadowman, it's like he's everywhere and nowhere. What's his deal? I see. The shadow means business. Shadow business, which is a dumb way of saying shady business. Up to no good in this neighborhood. Indeed, for the final part of the game we have left to cover, there's a lot going on. So I have a suggestion. Prepare yourself for the story of a traumatized child who comes of age. For the story of a tragedy forever written into time. For the story you never knew. We left off at the end of Act 2, right after we escaped the craziness of our well-trimmed neighbor's house. The next thing we're shown after we run away is a scene from an apartment in the city. We're no longer a kid. Some time has passed. Quite a bit of it, in fact. We're a full-blown adult. The things we saw as a child were a long time ago now. However, life as a real-life adult ain't all it's cracked up to be. We may not be getting locked in basements.
It rubs the lotion on its skin. It does this whenever it's told.
Mister, my family will pay cash. Whatever ransom you're asking for, they'll pay it.
But we are getting a civ, Ted. It means evicted. Because we're broke. Probably. Should have bought into crypto. Dogecoin is almost valued at a penny. Bye, bye, bye. But now, with nowhere else to go, we make our way back to our old house. The one right across the street from Home Depot's #1 customer. Turns out our house is all boarded up now, and the neighbor's house is a partially constructed shell of what it used to be. But serves him right for capturing us! For all I know, he's dead at this point, but ha! Karma's a biatch, ain't it, Mr. Neighborman? So we wander on over to the remains and scope it out. Where we look around and what's that? Some sort of shadow thing. AKA the Shadowman. The sight of this causes our protagonist to freak out. Well, this ain't good. Time to go home and answer the phone. Of course, no one is on the other line. So creepy. And again, we see the Shadowman across the street. Panic attack ensues, and we curl up on the couch to sleep it all away. I mean, I don't know how this guy can sleep with all this paranormal whatchamahoosit going on, but maybe he's a virtual Zach Bagans. Zach Bagans, everybody!
I'm going into my gym right now, LVAC. This is a huge gym. The spirits shows how the music is heard. And it's very scary. People can die when you taunt a demon. Is this guy looking at me over here like I'm a freak just because I'm lifting 65 pounds with one arm?
After falling asleep, Act 3 begins. We suddenly wake up to the same scream we heard at the beginning of Act 1, into the same neighbor-child struggle as before, except this is different. While Act 1 and 2 was us playing as the main character as a child, this seems to be us playing as our grown-up character, but back in the time when he was a child. What I mean by that is the house that we see in Act 3 is clearly the same as the house in Act 2, except more surreal and bizarre. It's as though our memory of how this house was has been warped and exaggerated, then projected into a dream. That is to say, this house is a nightmare. literally. But don't be going off thinking it's all just a dream. Oh no, Act 3 may occur in the dream dimension, but that doesn't make it not important. And it certainly doesn't make it not real. This is as real as it gets. But why would tinyBuild choose to continue the plot in a dream instead of real life? In order to understand the method to their madness, we must unravel the mysteries of the nightmare house itself. And so, into the contraption we go. There's still the electrical switch on the left side of the house. Well remembered, subconscious mind. Not to mention the janky ladder leading to the janky roof, and also a railroad. Cornelius Vanderbilt, watch out! But hold on. The answers we seek lie not in the specifics of the house. It's not about what things are where, but rather what we experience as we venture onwards. Inwards, perhaps. Case in point, the minigames. The supermarket, the school, the pantry. If this house is a recreation of a past experience, is it such a stretch to say these minigames are a recreation of other past experiences? I think not. The supermarket gives us the hiding ability, as though we were scared and timid as a child, fearing that the fellow shoppers were after us much like the neighbor was. The school gave us the push ability, which also stemmed from us being afraid and needing protection from either the teacher or a bully by pushing them out of the way. The pantry gave us the double jump ability, because as a small child we couldn't reach the light. Metaphorically, of course, because it was dark in that basement, and the darkness followed us into adulthood. It's as though playing through these warped memories of a childhood filled with fear is a past life regression where we are able to conquer previously unconquerable traumas. So much so, we're not only able to move past them, but also learn from them. Using these newfound abilities and some Hello Neighbor-esque puzzle solving, we make our way down to the dreamy basement, perhaps where the climax of our inner demons will occur, if I know anything about storytelling. This basement is very similar to the Act 1 basement, except it's a bit more disheveled and definitely more scary. We use the supermarket hiding ability to sneak past the Shadowman, and the push ability to get past the neighbor and sprint away into a room. Oh, the symbolism. Cutting it close, we latch the door behind us, blocking the neighbor from catching us. We're free to go now. But wait, the neighbor sounds sad. He's clearly upset, as you can tell by the banging, but there's also a sadness. The same sadness we've seen from our neighbor so many times before. For so long, we've accused him of being maniacal, for being insane, crazed, evil. Yet I would never expect the devil to cry, unless he was trying to manipulate me, but I don't think so. As we continue down the alley, we come into a room with the familiar cutout of the Simming Boy. The Simming Boy. This is his room, at least a representation of it. And oh god, the neighbor is a giant, and in a vast ocean of white nothingness, like in the betas. tinyBuild, what could this possibly mean? Alright, just gotta collect some stuff, flip some switches, shoot the neighbor with a firework, and ultimately bring him to his gigantic knees by shooting him in the knee. He took firework to the knee, haha memes. That way we can climb into the house on his back and trigger this sweet dream sequence. There are stacks of wanted posters everywhere. If we look to our left, there's the Shadowman floating over a grave. Over the grave. Then over here we see the neighbor crying next to a wanted poster with the Shadowman just watching. With the crow! Did I mention the crow? Yeah, it's not that important. What is important is the Shadowman. Not just here, but here. Our childhood self is playing with toys when suddenly he gets spooked. Running to the window, we see him. It. The shadow is lumbering towards the house. As our younger self sits down, we have to block the gargantuan Shadowman's attacks. Each time a section of the house is ripped out, but so long as we're blocking ourselves from its onslaught, we shield our past while growing bigger with each success. So symbolic! And continuing in that healthy symbolic fashion, we eventually confront the shadow in spite of its size. It explodes, and wouldn't you know it, we end up back in the vast sea of whiteness. With a house. The same one that was on the neighbor's back. Looking in, we see the neighbor is scared, upset. In the room next to him is the Shadowman, also clearly upset with its wavy arm gestures. It wants to get to the neighbor, but the way is blocked, and it looks like things will stay that way. That's all we get in this place, a visual representation of the neighbor's relationship with the Shadowman. You see, what we experienced all those years ago has taken on a life of its own. It controls itself more than we control it. That is, until we walk through that heavenly exit. When it's over, it's over. We wake up in the rundown house across the street from the empty husk that held us in its maze all those years ago. Something about the scene feels refreshing, like we're finally able to move on. Ah, sweet relief. We unload boxes with a lightness about us, as though to start a brand new life with a brand new outlook, in the very place that brought back so much negativity. And a creepy phone call! It's as though to move on, we only had to understand what happened to us. We, the nameless protagonist, were beckoned back to this place by a strange kind of fate, by our inability to pay rent. The memories, the emotions, and caged demons were still swirling in our head despite trying to bury them with past time and physical distance. But it's all behind us now, isn't it? The Shadowman is gone. He exploded, but why? Who was he to begin with? Why was he trying to get at the neighborman in that weird shack? Why couldn't he get at the neighborman in that weird shack? Well, I believe we can understand the Shadowman by not asking who he was, but what it was. Let's not forget that all of this, the Act 3 main house, the bizarre minigames, the spooky basement, and ultimately the scene we see before us now, all occurs in our head, in a dream. Dreams like the car accident, like the roller coaster. You'll notice in these that if you look at your shadow, that this is the adult protagonist. These insightful flashes into our neighbor's tragic backstory don't come to us until we're fully grown. So we can assume these revelations happened sometime between when we were a child and when we catch up to our protagonist at the end of Act 2. Over time, we've been processing what happened, slowly coming to terms with it, slowly understanding it, until our mental chaos comes to a climax in a dream state where we overcome the residual effects of the terrifying mystery we witnessed all those years ago. We see the residual effects on our psyche when a trip to the grocery store and walking through school feels threatening. It's only when we overcome these residual effects and the further bad memories they caused that we learn new abilities which help us sneak past the shadow, thwart the neighbor who we've built up in our head as a literal gargantuan roaring monster, and ultimately allow us to come to terms with everything at once. The shadow was at the torn down house, over the grave, in the basement, watching our sobbing neighbor, and finally attacking us because it is the manifestation of all our mental anguish that's been building since childhood. It's only after dreams tell us what caused our neighbor's decline, after we conquer our memory of the house, and after we finally stare the shadow in the face that we see the black mist for what it is. An entity that never was. An entity separate from the neighbor. An entity that represents him and everything he did to us. The shadow, the idea of what happened that became so deeply negative that it manifested as an entity in our mind, it was not what it appeared to be. Since our last Hello Neighbor video, we understood the neighbor isn't a bad guy. He may have played a part in a series of unfortunate accidents that killed his family, but he isn't evil, nor were his intentions. It was only after the nightmare, the dream that was Act 3, that our protagonist understood this too. Act 3 was not a meaningless dream that lets us explain away everything that happened, but rather one which strings together memories long repressed and allows us to re-experience them in the forms they've taken on after a decade of being tucked away in the cobwebby nooks and crannies of our mind. These memories of a kidnapping, of being lost in the chaotic house of the kidnapper and its dark, winding basement, these memories have evolved into what we saw throughout the final act, including the house and Shadowman, and they're far scarier than anything we saw in the previous acts, far scarier than anything that actually happened. Our protagonist finally knows the truth, and so the shadow evaporates, or explodes. That's the story of a child's fears lingering into adulthood. The story of what it means to understand tragedy. The story of Hello Neighbor. The story you never knew. But wait, I've got some deets to drop on you. If you want to know more about Hello Neighbor and what we think about it, or any other franchise for that matter, you should absolutely join our Discord. We get so many comments every day that it's way more likely you'll get a response when you post in the Ask Treesicle section of our Discord. Well, that, and we're planning on hanging out there for a few hours after this video gets released. Come say hi! Also, there's an amazing community to talk with, play games, and hang out with. So check it out by clicking the link in the description. Plus, you can set up your own servers where you and your friends can chat, play games, run YouTube channels, whatever you want. And if you stop by our server, we might just be doing some giveaways on there in the upcoming weeks. So join our Discord community and make some awesome friends while supporting us and Discord. It's a win for everyone, and I hope to talk to you on there. I'm Grant, and I'll see you all later. Bye, everyone!